an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Shadow and Bone, chapters 10, 11, 12, and 13. In these chapters, Alina gets to the heart of what has been holding her back, and unsurprisingly, it's sort of an innate desire to be like everyone else because she wants to maintain her relationship with Mal. It's sad. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Jill for commissioning this episode. I'm very glad that right before my vacation, I get to the chapter of this where she is able to get back in touch with her magic again. Because, it is hard to read a thing where a person has the ability in them and they just can't seem to access it. And I thought that it was done really well in this, where there are a lot of stories where somebody, we all know that they have an ability or a power, and we have to listen to the main character, expressing doubt that they even have the power in the first place. And I rather like that this doesn't do that. Alina knows it's there. She can feel it, and there are people who can bring it out in her. So it's not like we're behaving as if this is a non-existent thing. It is simply the accessing of it. That's the challenge for her. And I find that to be a lot more interesting than, I'm sure you've made a mistake. I can't do this. And then inevitably we have to sit through them figuring out that they indeed do have the power that, people are telling them that they have. Or hearing about there has been a prophecy. And obviously the main character is going to be the one that fulfills this prophecy. But we have to sit there and wait for the character to figure it out. It's just a little boring, So I'm a fan of this working in a slightly different direction where we don't find out about the prophecy until after she has done what she does in the fold. And when she does it, it's she doesn't even really get the enjoyment of it. She doesn't get to see it happen. She doesn't really remember anything, but everybody else does. So we know for a fact that this is something that she can do. And I don't know. I like the structuring of it this way. You know what I'm saying? So when we start off these chapters, she still hasn't accessed her ability yet. And, Bogda and the Darkling are all getting a little impatient about it. Now, the Darkling, I want to preface this by saying he's honestly being very patient about it. He has a lot less sort of concern than she does, because she is thinking to herself, there's a possibility that I'm never going to be able to access this alone. She starts to wonder whether it's ever going to happen for her if there isn't somebody holding her hand, or if she doesn't have an, what are they called again? The thing that accentuates your magic. But he is very much willing to sort of sit back and let it all happen within its own time. He's has a lot of faith that it's just going to take a little while. This is something that she's not used to doing. It's been buried quite deep. And, I said something last episode about how he looks at her hand and the way that she keeps rubbing her palm when she's nervous. And he says something about how it's funny how little we know about our own abilities. And I thought that that was a sign that she was going to, that there was some sort of trauma associated with her hands. And I still am not sure that that was wrong, because once she remembers what's happening, or what happened to her that made her choose to suppress her magic, she is remembering having her hands held as she's tested. So it might be that, but I don't know for sure. I don't feel like the connection is drawn so explicitly that I can confidently be like, oh yeah, I was right. That's what it was. All right. So chapter 10, she is waking up after her first day of classes really, really sore. She is not turning out to be an amazing fighter. She's still, because of repressing her magic, she's physically really weak. She hasn't got much of an appetite. She isn't like, putting on muscle, she isn't sleeping well. She is just missing that sort of spark of vitality. And, I kind of feel for her with this. Like, even knowing what's going on as a reader and being like, oh yeah, it's your magic. And it sucks that, like, I feel like the people around her, does she know, I guess is my main question. Is she aware that that's why she's so sickly and like not doing well? Because one would think that the folks who are going to school with her or her instructors or the Darkling would be like, once your magic begins to come back, you're going to be feeling a lot better and you're going to be stronger. But I don't feel like she necessarily knows that. Now, I don't know what good it does to tell her that if she's not able to access her magic. Maybe not knowing that is better. But, I just kind of wonder if she's aware of that and why, if other people are, they haven't mentioned it. And if, like, Maria and Nadia, do they know either? Like, she tries to keep the fact that she can't access her magic a secret. And she mentions later that they all seem kind of bewildered by the sudden change in her once she is able to access it. Like, they don't know how to explain it. And Genya at one point tells her that there are a bunch of, like, hilarious, by the way, rumors going around about what actually happened to her. So maybe people haven't repressed their magic enough for them to be aware that this is what happens when you do that. It might just not occur very often, I don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry. I keep like starting and getting off track. So we have then like the sort of montage. She does this over and over again for days. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I wasn't a map maker anymore. And if I couldn't manage to become a Grisha, where would that leave me? I thought of the Darkling's words that night beneath the broken beams of the barn. You're the first glimmer of hope I've had in a long time. He believed I was the Sun Summoner. He believed I could help him destroy the Fold. And if I could, no soldier, no merchant, no tracker would ever have to cross the Unsea again. But as the days dragged on, that idea began to seem more and more absurd. Yeah, I feel like so badly for her here because it's not that she doesn't want to access it. It's not that she is secretly unwilling somewhere inside her. It's that she repressed it so completely in a moment that she genuinely doesn't remember anymore. That undoing it is impossible for her right now. And I love this as like a sort of analogy for the way that we create patterns of behavior in our lives. This is how it works. There is a moment, a confluence of ideas, of preconceptions, of judgments that come at us from all sides when we're kids that inform the way that we see the world and the way we choose to interact with the world. And when you go to therapy, these kinds of like epiphany are very frequent, right? Like you just suddenly, your therapist is like, well, it sounds like you're afraid of such and such. And you suddenly realize, oh my God, I have purposely let myself fail at these things because I have been afraid that succeeding would mean that, for me, for example, I'm afraid that succeeding means that people won't like me anymore. I am convinced that being an underdog is the advantage that I have and the thing that makes me relatable to other people. So I have an unconscious sabotage that I commit against myself, when I'm beginning to become successful, because I believe that being successful will result in people liking me less and will alienate people and make them feel like I am somehow like above myself. And I want to remain relatable, and I don't want to be too intimidating or threatening. So I undo what I have done that has been successful in order to maintain relationships that I care about, because I'm worried about it. And that is something that I didn't realize about myself. I didn't quite like put my finger on the fact that I was doing that. And that's sort of what happens here with Alina once she realizes what she did to repress her magic. It's like it took place so long ago that she doesn't even like remember it. And she made herself sort of forget what even led up to it. That is how completely she managed to repress it. That the instance of her and Mal being taken aside and tested, and then her being separated from him, that was also sort of erased from things, because she just couldn't risk having that memory either, or else it would lead to her coming to the eventual conclusion about her magic anyway. So all of that had to go. And it's a really startling thing when you find out that you have managed to trick yourself like that, because we love to think that we are logical beings, that we put patterns together and connect dots, and that we are, oftentimes we like to tell ourselves that we have more clarity and self-awareness than other people do. And while that may be true in some cases, it's not true to the point that we don't learn, but we just love to think that we know everything we need to know. And when you realize that you are that good at being in denial, at fooling yourself about your own motivations for things, it can be really, it can be a little scary, to be honest, because then you feel like you can't even trust yourself. And that is an odd feeling to have when you think, of course, I just want the best for myself. Of course, I just want to do well. And then you find out that, like, really in your heart of hearts, maybe you don't. And what does that mean about how you've carried out literally everything in your life? Where has that manifested that you didn't realize that's what was happening at the time? So, Alina, I'm just like, it's such a literal example of that, but it feels so incredibly true to me. And it is something that I am sort of struggling with. When she is able to release her magic, and it results in an empowerment and a feeling of completeness and health and vitality that she hasn't had before, that's sort of what happens if you have a true breakthrough and are able to see a pattern and begin to undo it. You start to feel different. And for her in this situation, it's lucky that it's all 100% positive, that she is genuinely like, I am really glad that I have gotten my magic back. And she's not at this point worried about Mal anymore, because she has sort of decided that Mal has dumped her, and we'll get there. So there's no downside to it lurking where she's like worried, what is Mal going to do if he finds out that I can act? There's nothing like remaining holding her back there. Unfortunately, in life, when we have epiphanies, it takes a lot more for us to break out of our own patterns. Usually we will have a moment of like, oh yes, the vitality, and I feel so much more empowered. And while that feels good, it also feels a little bit frightening, because it's very unfamiliar, and we will often retreat back to patterns that feel familiar and comforting, even though they are very damaging. That's something that as a kid, I couldn't believe when people would say that. Sometimes you could go back to what's familiar, even though it's bad for you. And I would genuinely be like, I'm sorry, I don't follow. And now as a grown-up, I'm like, oh yeah, no, okay. I get why the familiarity is like, we mistake that for being good. We mistake that for being comfort in a true way. And Alina doesn't seem to have that problem here. I am worried about when Mal comes back into the picture. Because what goes on here is that Alina has been writing to Mal over and over again, not sure why he doesn't write her back. And I can't help but wonder, is the Darkling keeping her from getting Mal's letters on purpose? Because there is something about the interaction that she and the Darkling have, where he says it's funny how little we know about our own gifts, that leads me to believe he has a sudden insight into why her power isn't surfacing. I don't know how he could know that it's because of Mal that she's repressing herself. It could be an insight. It could be something that he senses from their interactions together and him touching her and I don't know. But I have a hard time believing that Mal just fucking decided to drop off the face of Earth and never respond to any of her letters for no good reason. So I have to believe that this is on purpose, that there is some reason for him to be kept from responding to her. And I don't know what that looks like. Or it could be Genya, for all I know. Or not Genya. Zoya. Because we met Zoya, right? Am I wrong? In the Crooked Kingdom? Or not in Crooked Kingdom. It was in it was Crooked Kingdom. Right? And Zoya is one of the people who comes and helps them with their final plan, I think. And so is Genya, if I'm not mistaken. Am I wrong about this? But I wonder if maybe Zoya, because she seems really jealous already, could that partially be because of Mal? Is she into Mal and doesn't really like the relationship that he has with Alina? I don't know, but it seems like it could be. It would be a rather petty reason to have her not getting his letters, but sometimes life can be that way, and that'll be fine. Oh, Kai is here. Hi, Kai. Evia says, you're very right. They both make appearances. Okay, cool. So yeah, interesting. They wind up sort of working together. All right. So Bagra, I keep calling her Bagda. Bagda, I think, is the name of the maid/nanny that Miranda has in Sex and the City. Bagra believed that my lack of appetite and inability to sleep were connected to my failure to call my power. How much harder is it to walk with your feet bound or to talk with a hand over your mouth, she lectured. Why do you waste all of your strength fighting your true nature? I wasn't, or I didn't think I was. So yeah, I apparently, because I was saying earlier, why doesn't anybody seem to notice this? But apparently Bagra knows. So it's funny to me that the rest of her classmates don't put it together that that's what's going on. So she's talking about all of this time passing, making an effort and not really seeming to get, she's sort of spinning her wheels, and she sees the Darkling occasionally from the outskirts of things, but she isn't talking to him. They're not having the meetings that they were having. And at one point she's alone in the library studying, and she has an encounter with that fucking priest who is just the creepiest. Honestly, his name is the Apparat. Well, that's his title. I am low-key kind of wanting him to not be a bad guy just because he comes across as so cartoonishly creepy, that it would be sort of fun for that to be subverted and for him to actually be a sort of okay dude who just has this unfortunate lack of PR skills and ability to connect with people. But he is being low-key sort of threatening, but then when she kind of checks his expression, she doesn't think he means it that way. There's things that he's saying you have suffered much and I fear that you will suffer further. And she's just sort of what the fuck does that mean? But when she examines his expression, he just seems to be really sort of sympathetic. Girl, I know you've got a lot ahead of you and this is going to suck for you. And I'm really sorry about that. Even though that's not what it sounds like, And he gives her a book as a gift called The Lives of Saints. And he asks her, he says, like, peasants love saints, but they really hate the Grisha. So they love these, like, saints that can perform miracles and do things that are essentially magic. But then actual human beings that can do that stuff, they dislike and resent. And why do you think that is? And she doesn't know. And he says, I think it's because the Grisha do not suffer the way that the saints suffered, which is a pretty good insight, actually. I think that's exactly right. A saint can perform miracles through faith and self-denial and martyrism. I don't know if that's a word. Martyrdom, I guess. Grisha are just born with an ability. That's it. It's not earned, in quotes, So that makes sense to me. And then that's part of why he says, people are sort of praying to you because you are a bit of an anomaly amongst Grisha in that you have suffered and you are able to do something that nobody else is able to do. And it makes her really uncomfortable to know that this is something that people are looking to her as the answer. And the pressure on her with that, she's just not doing real good with this. It's very unnerving to her to know that people already, before she's done anything, are looking to her as like the answer and the solution. So chapter 11, when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. So here comes Zoya. Zoya is just astonishingly beautiful. I don't know if she's prettier than Ginya, but they seem somewhat on par with one another. And both Marie and Nadia are like, fuck, this bitch is back. But of course, when Zoya comes over to greet them, they're all like, hi, oh my God, I missed you so much. And it's just really amazing to watch. And Zoya is evidently really fucking snobby, thinks she's better than everyone. And what's so irritating is the fact that, like, she's low-key actually better than everyone. She has so much power. She's a squaller. And it's just extremely annoying for her to have this, like, overinflated sense of self that is actually completely borne out by fact. So Zoya comes over, asks to get introduced as if she doesn't know who Alina is, but it seems pretty clear that she very much does know who Alina is. And then she hugs her and whispers in her ear, "You stink of Karamzin," and pulls away, continuing to smile and behave as if nothing's wrong. So she just makes it very clear immediately that she and Alina are not on the same side, that they are rivals for some reason, even though Alina did not agree to this. She's not interested in this. And she's already having a really hard time and doesn't appreciate having yet another person to fucking be worried about now. Everybody else, it's kind of funny because Alina's like, oh, you guys are all such sycophants and want me to be you're like a member of your particular sect, I guess, faction, because it would like bring honor to it. But you're very tiresome and I don't like any of you. And then Zoya shows up and is like, no, bitch, I don't want you anywhere near me. You are the worst. So she is like, she goes to class to do combat training, and Zoya's here and she's been traveling. So she was like, apparently you can just like leave and come back because she's doing stuff for the Darkling, which doesn't really get specified, but I'm assuming it has to do with like the, resistance, right? The secret, whatever it is they're doing. And Zoya gets paired against Alina for combat training. And Alina sort of like digs deep and finds it within herself to take Zoya down because of a mistake that Zoya makes. Zoya gets overconfident and she starts really coming at Alina with everything a little too close. And Alina takes the advantage from this and winds up like tripping her and getting her knocked to the ground behind the knees. And just as everybody else is sort of like applauding that she won, Zoya sits up and throws with her magic Alina like across the room and slams her into a wall, which I kind of expected this to just be an outburst of like, what's the word I want? Pique. That would simply be looked down on because of it being like not honorable, right? But it turns out that like Alina gets genuinely hurt from this. She gets fucked up. Zoya really, it's more than just the principle of the thing. She did something very shitty and hurt, like genuinely damaging, which I just didn't think it was going to go there, but okay. Like her ribs are broken. So Zoya gets punished. Like when she's talking to, when Alina is talking to Marie and Nadia later, Marie tells Alina that Botkin was absolutely furious and that she has never seen him that angry before. He threw Zoya out of the training rooms. I thought he might hit her himself. Which, I like that because so many times in stories like this, when there is somebody that like a person has as a rival and it's like a school setting or even a work setting, they manage to like do these little underhanded, passive aggressive, shitty things that you can't really like nail down and point to and be like, they did this. It's all looks above board to the authority figures around. And I sort of liked the fact that Zoya does something that even authority figures are just like, girl, what the fuck? And I don't know. I just appreciated that there's some holding her accountable for this. So Alina gets out of bed and is like, after they do some healing on her, she's still not feeling great, and she's standing by the window, just kind of looking outside when all of a sudden the apparat is here again. I was very sorry to hear of your injury. The Darkling should be more watchful of his charges. And she's just kind of like, first of all, how long has he been here? Second of all, why the fuck is he just hovering around watching me? Third of all, where is the Corporalki healer? Because they are supposed to be sort of in charge of this ward and they just appear to be gone. And this is when he tells her about them making like altars to her and all of this stuff. And the next morning, Genya comes by and Alina tells her about all of this. And Genya's like, all right, I know he's like a total creep, but he's harmless, essentially. And Alina does not agree with this. She's like, he isn't, though. He had a look in his eyes. Like, there's just something not right there. And he reaches for her, which causes her to knock the glass over. And then the healer comes back because of the noise. So there's a question in her mind, I think. What would have happened if I didn't make noise and attract attention? What if I wasn't able to, get somebody in here before he was able to make physical contact? What would he have done? And we don't know. And she says, excuse me, I'm not staying here again tonight. I want to sleep in my room with a door that locks. And Genya's like, yeah, no, that's fair. Okay, sure. So then she asks Genya about Mal. And she's just like, I'm not hearing back from him. I've written to him. I don't know if my letters are even getting through. And there is a chance that, like, he's not okay. And Genya's like, have you been checking the casualty lists? And she's like, yeah, I don't want to. But yes, I have been. And then she says, maybe Mal was glad I was gone, glad to be free of old friendships and obligations. Or maybe he's lying in a hospital bed somewhere and you're being a petty little brat. I chided myself. And And so eventually she finds out that he is fine and that it's just he hasn't been writing to her for whatever reason. And she has one of those moments that I think many of us have where she's like, I know I should just be glad that he's okay. Like, if I really cared about him, all I would want is for him to be safe and healthy and fine. But no, finding out that he is alive and just not answering me, and that my writing him, I was doing that the correct way this whole time and the letter should have been getting through. Finding this out is almost worse than finding out that he's been hurt or that something has been in the way of me communicating with him. So chapter 12, the next morning wasn't as bad as I'd expected. Zoya was already in the domed hall when I entered. She sat by herself at the end of the summoner's table, eating her breakfast in silence. So she goes to Bagra to have her class. And when she gets there, the Darkling is already there and the two of them are arguing about something. And the Darkling and Bagra have a really interesting dynamic because she obviously still holds a lot of sway over him. Like, he clearly cares about her opinion and she is not afraid of him. It's not like it is with everybody else where she, you know, everyone else is always like bowing and scraping and attempting to impress him or flatter him in some way. She could give a shit. She's just like, you're just the child that I taught. Yeah, you have an ability other people don't have. Whoop-de-fucking-do. And because of that, I believe, is why her opinion matters to him. So what it turns out is happening here is that the Darkling wants to get Alina an amplifier, which I had been like wondering why they didn't do this. And then a little bit later, because this doesn't feel clear to me in the outset of this conversation, and I kind of wish that this was written so that we know some other information initially, because I was busy like arguing in my head while I read this section. And then we get a perfectly good explanation and answer to my argument later, but I didn't know it while I was reading this. And so I feel like it interfered with my enjoyment of the conversation here. So what we're doing is we want to get Alina an amplifier, which for some reason nobody has mentioned, even though I definitely kind of wondered why we weren't doing that. And the Darkling believes that there is a creature out there which is allegedly mythical. It's not even something that's like, oh, I know people who have seen it before. Like, there is some, but it's all, you know, secondhand. There's no proof that this thing exists. It's called Morozova's Herd. She's also heard of unicorns and the Shuhan dragons. And evidently, these are magical white deer that appear at twilight. And the Darkling is like, well, they're not magical any more than like were magical as Grisha, but they are really, really powerful. And they make the best amplifiers, their horns. My hunters claim they've seen signs of them, though they've never seen the creatures themselves. So, like, again, they've seen signs of them, which I don't know what that means. How do you know the signs are not any other kind of deer? I don't know. There's no specifics given here. If Morozova's stag can be taken, its antlers can be made into an amplifier. A necklace? He nodded. The most powerful amplifier ever known. And you want to give it to me? Wouldn't it be just easier for me to get a claw or a fang or, I don't know, pretty much anything else? If we have any hope of destroying the fold, we need the stag's power. But maybe if I had one to practice with, you know it doesn't work that way. I do. Haven't you been reading your theory? And then it just sort of, it ends there. That conversation with like, haven't you been reading your theory? She's like, come on, dude. There is so much theory to read. I don't know what you're talking about. But he doesn't explain it here. So I'm just like arguing in my head, just give her one for now. What's the problem? And it turns out that Grisha can only have one amplifier in their lifetime, that they bond with it in this very specific way. It's not like an iPhone where you just like can upgrade and replace it if something happens to it, which that is really worrisome to me. The idea that they have this one item that amplifies their ability, and should anything occur to this like talisman, what then? Is it like just that's it forever and you're just fucked and your power is never quite as strong as it used to be? Like, that sucks. But yeah, we don't get the explanation until later. And when he says in this scene, you know, it doesn't work that way. I mean, I don't. So, and I didn't even realize that's what he meant. So like, I just was so distracted throughout, just being like, I don't understand. Just give her whatever right now. It's fine. Just like, see if it works. So at this point, we get a little bit of the frisson of romance for the first time. There's always been, you know, a suspicion in my mind about the two of them because of the connection that they have with having exact opposite ends of the same type of power. They both are able to control light, except that his is like in the removal of it, and hers is the bringing of it. So I kind of expected for there to be something going on between the two of them, but this is the first time that Alina seems to feel it as well, because I've always just sort of been expecting it as this outside, like, well, yeah, that seems like it's going to happen thing. But Alina has not seemed to be looking at the Darkling that way in particular, other than the general, like, wow, he is really good looking, which everybody seems to have. But this is the first time they're talking, and she starts to sort of like blush when he is looking at her in this certain way. And he asks her also to like keep the thing to herself, this whole theory that he has about this herd actually existing. And he gives her one last look before he walks away. And when Alina looks up, Baghra is standing there watching the two of them and just sort of like snorts to herself. And Alina doesn't seem to quite like, she hasn't admitted to herself what is happening about this. She thinks to herself, for no reason at all, I blushed. Yes, no reason at all. So yeah, then she goes to the library and finds out about the amplifiers and everything. Fall turned to winter, and cold winds stripped the branches of the palace gardens bare. Our tables were still laden with fresh fruit and flowers furnished from the Grisha hothouses, where they made their own weather. But even juicy plums and purple grapes did little to improve my appetite. Somehow, I'd thought that my conversation with the Darkling might change something in me. I wanted to believe the things he'd said, and standing by the lakeshore I almost had. But nothing had changed. I still couldn't summon without Baghra's help. I still wasn't truly a Grisha. So, at this point, Baghra is starting to get irritated because she feels that, if anything, Alina is trying a little bit less than she used to, because she is sort of like waiting for this talisman to appear in her life and solve her problems for her. And it's very clear that Baghra does not think much of this idea. Like, Baghra believes that an amplifier in general is a good idea, but it's clear that in terms of like getting her hopes up for this like magical thing that will fix it all and be the most powerful kind of amplifier that anybody has ever used, she's not here for any of this. It's like, I think she sees it as a real shortcut and lazy. I didn't know what punishment Zoya had received, but she continued to ignore me. She'd been barred from the training rooms, and I'd heard she would be returning to Kribursk after the winter fete. So I like to think that the Darkling heard about what Zoya did and took her aside and was like, bitch, what is your fucking problem? Are we in high school? Are you doing this? Come on. Jesus Christ. Get it together. So as the weather gets colder, she gets a new like kefta for the winter, and she feels like a bit of a fraud when she puts it on. She's just kind of like, ugh. So this is when she gets the news about Mal, and she is just devastated about it. Had he sighed with embarrassment when the 5th and the 6th and the 7th letters had arrived? I cringed. Please write, Mal. Please don't forget me, Mal. Pathetic, I thought, brushing angry tears away. So she goes to her meetup with Baghra, and Baghra can tell that there is some shit happening. And at this point, Baghra's like, all right, what's your fucking problem? Why do you have this attitude today? Are you tired of waiting for your magical deer? Is that it? You want your amplifier so bad? Poor baby. And Alina snaps and is just like, I am so sick of all of this bullshit. I'm sick of this kefta. I'm sick of these classes. I'm sick of getting beaten up. I'm sick of you. And Baghra's just sort of staring at her and finally is like, no, that's not it. Something else is going on. What is it? And then she says, are you homesick? And Alina says, homesick for what? In this really, bitter sort of, like, Baghra has gotten right to the heart of the matter immediately. But Alina is just not wanting to confide, understandably, in this person whom she does not really see as a friend, which why would she? Why should she? So when Alina says homesick for what, Baghra says, you tell me, what's so bad about your life here? New clothes, a soft bed, food every day, like a chance to be the Darkling's pet. And Alina gets really defensive and is like, I am not his pet. And Baghra says, but you want to be. Don't think I didn't see the way that you looked at him. And Alina has a bit of a tantrum and stands up, like knocks her chair over as she stands up and says, this is a waste of time. I have had enough of this, and starts to leave. And Baghra yells, where are you going? What's waiting for you out there? And Alina says nothing. No one. And all of a sudden, she just collapses as like the full understanding of what happened to her comes rushing back. So has this sort of flashback. She's in Karamzin. There is a man pulling her away from Mal. I see Mal's fingertips slip as his hand is torn away from mine. The young man in purple picks Mal up and drags him into the library, slamming the door behind him. I can hear Mal shouting my name. The woman in red slides her hand around my wrist. I feel a sudden rush of pure certainty wash over me. So this woman is an amplifier, and she is able to touch Alina's magic. But Alina is so distracted hearing Mal screaming her name and being kept from her in the other room that she has this instinctive reaction of pushing down her magic and keeping it even hidden, because the woman, the amplifier who's touching her, you really get the sense that like she felt that. She knows it's in there and got that first like jolt of it. But the longer she's touching Alina, the more Alina is shoving it down and the less certain the woman who is touching her becomes. It's like she got a flash of it and then she's like, wait, where'd it go? And, when it disappears this way, there's not really all that much she can do because it's apparently gone. I wiggle and wail until she finally lets me go. That was why the Darkling's call had felt familiar, but somehow I'd managed to resist her. At last I understood. And she remembers how before Mal had arrived, Karamzin had just been bleak and awful. She felt so alone. She was always frightened. Everybody seemed unfriendly. And then when Mal showed up, the whole outlook changed for her. And she was suddenly happy and felt at home. And things were like warm and felt like family. And so these people turn up, and by the very act of like separating from her, or her from him immediately, they show her, if she is totally different from Mal, just how things are going to go down, that she's going to be taken away from him. And she can't cope with that. So she makes her magic go away in order to stick with Mal for longer. And this ends up making her seem sickly and ill as well. The next morning I'd woken to find dark circles beneath my eyes. They'd been with me ever since. And now she's thinking about the fact that Mal has like stopped replying, apparently does not give a shit anymore. And she is out here still hanging on to her hopes of hearing from him, to the point that she is still repressing her power even, and trying to pretend that they aren't different when they are. That's just like all there is to it. I thought I was making such an effort, but deep down, some part of me just wanted to go home to Mal. Some part of me hoped that this had all been a mistake, that the Darkling would realize his error and send me back to the regiment, that Mal would realize how much he'd missed me, that we'd grow old together in our meadow. Mal had moved on, but I was still standing frightened before those three mysterious figures holding tight to his hand. It was time to let go. That day on the Shadowfold, Mal had saved my life and I had saved his. Maybe that was meant to be the end of us. So then she connects with her power. And I love this moment so much, guys. I got a little bit teary-eyed. The thought filled me with grief. Grief for the dreams we'd shared, for the love I'd felt, for the hopeful girl I would never be again. That grief flooded through me, dissolving a knot that I hadn't even known was there. I closed my eyes, feeling tears slide down my cheeks, and I reached out to the thing within me that I'd kept hidden for so long. "I'm sorry," I whispered to it. "I'm sorry I left you so long in the dark. I'm sorry, but I'm ready now." I called, and the light answered. I felt it rushing toward me from every direction, skimming over the lake, skittering over the golden domes of the little palace, under the door and through the walls of Bagra's cottage. I felt it everywhere. I opened my hands, and the light bloomed right through me, filling the room, illuminating the stone walls, the old tile oven, and every angle of Bagra's strange face. It surrounded me, blazing with heat, more powerful and more pure than ever before, because it was all mine. I wanted to laugh, to sing, to shout. At last there was something that belonged wholly and completely to me. "Good," said Bagra, squinting in the sunlight. "Now we work." Oh, Bagra, never change, you little sausage. So things very quickly turn around for her at this point, and nobody really knows what to make of it. It's so much fun. Genya is telling her about the rumors. Marie and Ivo were speculating that Fjerdans had infected you with some disease. "I thought Grisha didn't get sick." Exactly. That's what made it so very sinister. But apparently, the Darkling cured you by feeding you his own blood and an extract of diamonds. Zoya tried to put it around that you were possessed. Like, oh my God. And, you know, while her classes are still difficult and she's not just immediately excelling at everything, being able to access her power is at the very least a huge step forward. So Bagra says, "This isn't something separate from you. It isn't an animal that shies away from you or chooses whether or not to come when you call it. Do you ask your heart to beat or your lungs to breathe? Your power serves you because that is its purpose, because it cannot help but serve you. Sometimes I felt like there was a shadow in Bagra's words, a second meaning she wanted me to understand. But the work I was doing was hard enough without guessing at the secrets of a bitter old woman. So I have so many questions about Bagra, and I really hope that we get the answers, because later on, Alina is talking to the Darkling about what Bagra's powers are. And he literally doesn't even know. He's like, well, this bitch is real old. I think she did something like from before any of us were even born. Who knows? I think she might have been one of the Tide Makers, is like his closest guest. I don't know. What happened to Bagra, y'all? What's up with that? I really want to know. My lessons with Botkin were the real surprise. As a little girl, I had run and played with Mal in the woods and fields, but I'd never been able to keep up with him. I'd always been too sickly and frail and easy to tire. But as I ate and slept regularly for the first time in my life, all of that changed. Botkin put me through brutal combat drills and seemingly endless runs through the palace grounds, but I found myself enjoying some of the challenges. I liked learning what this new, stronger body could do. Listen, this is some real shit. I don't know about y'all, but I have been attempting over the past year to find a workout regimen that works for me, and I have really fallen off the past couple of weeks. Holidays and also depression and everything. But when you start to be consistent and you see the changes in your performance, it is a real trip to realize that I thought that I was just bad at things. But the truth is that I just wasn't quite strong enough yet, and I can make myself strong enough. I just have to continuously do this. And it's a weird, it's such a slow process that it doesn't quite hit you that you're making any changes at all until suddenly you're in a class that was really difficult for you and you're able to just get through it and it's no problem. And you end the class being like, oh, I don't feel like I want to die. That's new. Oh, it's like water wearing away at a stone and you don't see it happening, but then you leave and come back, a year later and there's a groove that the water has really worn away at that stone, but you just couldn't quite tell at the time. And this is just that, but accelerated because it happens overnight, and that is a really good feeling. And it's something that I'm trying to keep in mind as I struggle to get back on track with consistently going to the gym, because there is nothing quite as good as the feeling of your body surprising you in a positive way and you being like, oh shit, I did that, So eventually she's actually able to land a blow on him. And he gives her a knife made of Grisha steel. And he says, steel is earned. When she says thank you, he taps on a scar at his throat. Steel is earned. And I'm just like, what's that about? Because because she landed a blow, is that it? That's all it took? Because that surprises me. But maybe it's just that big a deal. I don't know. So Christmas comes around. And she's just sort of adjusting to fitting in a little bit better while still not really feeling at home completely. This is just such a funny thing because this is extremely relatable to me. I felt more comfortable with the summoners now, but I doubted I'd ever really enjoy being around Marie and Nadia. I was much happier sitting in my room with Genya, drinking tea and gossiping by the fire. This is just always how I've been. I want to have a big group of friends. I want this sort of theoretical babysitter's club, big clique that all of us are so close. It's just not how I am. I have one or two people that I get really real with. And then I have a larger group of friends that I'm never quite comfortable around, that it's just not really the same. And when I was in school, I was very self-reliant. I had a boyfriend, and that was probably the most codependent I got, but I didn't really connect with a lot of other students, and there were people that I was I apparently fit best with this group, but I don't really like being here too much, you know, like it was just a weird thing. So at this point, we find out that the king and queen have sons, which didn't know that. The eldest, who is the heir to the throne, is pretty handsome, but he's just sort of comes across as like an enormous snob. Genya says that he's like kind of one of those like drunken playboys that just like bets all of his money away and is just really kind of does nothing. And then there is the younger son that is nicknamed Puppy. And there are rumors that he isn't strictly royal. Only the queen knows for sure. He's a bit of a black sheep anyway. He insisted on doing his military service in the infantry. Then he apprenticed to a gunsmith. He hasn't been to court in years. I think he's off studying shipbuilding or something equally dull. He'd probably get along well with David, she added sourly. And there's a bit of a cute moment here where, like, Alina talks with Genya about liking David, and it seems sweet until we back away from it, and Alina's thinking about how she has never confided to Genya about her interest in Mal, and that's because there's nothing to talk about. That, you know, which is just bums me out. So eventually we have this scene where she is playing around with the like dresses from the queen's closet, and she gets distracted with Genya because Genya pulls her in front of the mirror wearing one of the gowns, and she doesn't recognize herself. She looks amazing, and she's even gained weight and has this like hourglass figure now, and she's just like, God damn, I look amazing. What happened? And she gets so wrapped up in this that she forgets to go to dinner, and she forgets that Bagra's class is coming up. So she winds up getting there late, and Bagra is extremely put out and pushes her harder than she's ever pushed her, until finally Alina has spread her like light all around the island that she's standing on. Like, she pushes it further than she ever has. But when she finally loses her grip on the magic, she hears the Darkling say it's not enough. And it turns out that he's been watching the whole time. And that's part of why Bagra like was pushing her, because she wanted him to see the most that Alina was capable of. So at this point, he talks to her, and she kind of is like, I get it. Look, if I don't have the amplifier, I'm kind of useless. And he's like, you're not useless. And she's like, all right, but I'm not like useful. What the fuck else am I going to do with sunlight power? Like, this isn't really, this isn't going to come in handy too much. And he asks, if I tell you that I still believe we can find the stag, would you think I'm mad? Why would you care what I think? He looked genuinely baffled. I don't know, he said, but I do. And then he kissed me. What the fuck is this? Because he pulls away and seems like a little bit surprised as well. And then when she goes and meets up with her friend, Sergei has his arm around Marie, and she's like, maybe there's something in the air. And I'm like, is there some fucking Grisha around, like, messing with everybody's hormones and making them suddenly super horny? Like, what is happening here? I really wonder about this. Yeah, I don't know. So then the last chapter, and I'm running out of time, but there's, not all that much left here, I think. The last chapter is that there is a grand fete at the palace at the end of winter, where all of the Grisha are meant to come and essentially perform, although you're not supposed to call it that. And Alina is just nonstop thinking about the fact that the Darkling kissed her, is very distracted. Bagra keeps sort of like taunting her because she seems to be very aware of the fact that this is why she's not like putting in the work, because she's distracted. And she goes to see Botkin for her go through her drills, even though she doesn't have to on the day of the fete. Made me drill using my mirrors. Without them, I was still pretty helpless against him, but with my gloves on, I could almost hold my own, or so I thought. When the lesson was over, Botkin admitted he'd been pulling his punches. Should not hit girl in face when she is going to party, he said with a shrug. Botkin will be fairer tomorrow. I like that moment. So she is she is getting ready for the thing, and wait, let's see. I'm like, did I go past the point? Because I remember this part, and I'm like, I'm hoping that I didn't overread, because I don't think I did. Let's see. I said this third section, thank you again to Christine for the breakdown, ended with chapter 13. I'm like, which chapter is this? Is this 13? No, this is 14. I know what happened. I listened into the first 2 pages of chapter 14 on the audiobook. Okay. So I'm good. I haven't gotten to the Winter Fate yet. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to wrap up then. I am really, really looking forward to, though, what the hell happens with her power and this amplifier, because, I'm hoping that the amplifier, well, I don't know. I have a little theory, a Dumbo's feather sort of thing, but we'll see. Evia says, I think she was grieving the loss of Mal's relationship, so now that she's developing a little crush on the Darkling, she's not tuning out other people's affectionate displays. I've been there. Oh, that's interesting, Evia. I didn't think of that. It's just more the fact that the Darkling seemed so surprised at the fact that he kissed her that made me go, did he mean to do that? Or did somebody sort of fuck up his restraint somehow? Did something happen? I don't know. But maybe it was fucking Bagra, and she was just just kiss her, you fucking idiot. That would be funny if she's off to the sidelines, just now kiss. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you again very much to Jill for commissioning this episode, and I will be seeing you all again shortly with a new episode. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.